The official recording's not going yet, Cole.
Okay, but we are live up on the internet.
But we are live on the internet now, so watch what you say. And we are
a lot of responsibility.
At welikeDrinking.com/show, as you ought to do on Monday nights around 7:30ish Pacific, when Solomon decides to change the plan. I'm glad everybody's here.
There's already 4 more people than I thought there would be.
Hey,
Jim, Cody, Brad, Laura, thanks for joining us on a Monday night. The Monday nights weird me out, man. Like, it's throwing me for a loop.
It's odd. We're going up against The Bachelor tonight, y'all.
It's like playing a hockey game at like 8 o'clock in the morning,
right? Or 10:30 at night.
Or 10:30. Okay. Well, that's normal for us veterans. But anyway, I have to let Sharon take a sip of my Mexican firing squad, and then I'll be right back.
All right, we'll be live by the time you can't hear me.
This guy.
I
do love how he still doesn't know how to use the mute button. If we listen closely, they might yell about sandwiches or something.
I can't remember. We're recording again. Yep, Laura, I'm the same way. Still, we used to record on Wednesdays, Cole, and then we moved it to Tuesdays, which has been great moving it to Tuesdays. But then I get to Thursday and I'm like, it's Friday. It's Friday. Oh, shit.
This guy. Oh, I should probably.
Like, ooh, that's really good. Do you have any extra? I'm like, no.
Cole or Jeff, is your drink mixed?
I gotta shake it up. So just give me a minute. I'm gonna take off my headphones. Don't say anything about me, and I'm gonna mute myself. John, check this out. This is the craziest thing. Watch this.
He did that to himself.
He did. It's not me doing it to him.
Go get a Han. We're starting the show. If you want to go get a glass, I'll pour you some out.
0 minutes in and everything's falling apart. That's
there you go.
Solomon.
Get it out now. Got myself in the beverage. So enjoying the party.
Nice. So Solomon didn't go mullet because it looks like he's a party in the front and a party in the back.
Yeah, he didn't take that much off.
Yeah, I was expecting a more high and tight vibe based on how you were describing
this is
the
high
new
and tight
aesthetic.
this is high and tight for him.
Oh, fair.
I don't think he'd cut his hair the entire pandemic, so it was getting pretty long.
I threatened my wife with that, but I still managed to get a couple in. She actually cut my hair a few times this past year. She got pretty good at it.
So did mine. She refused to do it after the second time.
Yep, I got one cut in, and then she's like, "Yeah, I'm done." Yeah, saying that you didn't go mullet, man.
No. Oh, did you see the whole thing? It's I called it the. Can you give me one of those like modern mohawks, like not skinny, just wide? So like, I could make it do some amazing things. It's really fun and Eccles, much to your chagrin, I literally said to them, they're like, well, how much hair do you want them to take off? I'm like, oh, I still want to be able to throw it into a man bun once in a while. So.
Perfect. Mission accomplished.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Thanks for sharing. Get it?
Yeah, I tried not. I didn't want to go.
All right.
Cole's like, what in the fuck did I sign myself up for? I'm basically just, it's like a reality show watching it on 3 people's homes. All right. Okay. Okay. Good job, Cody. That's the way to do it. All right. Yeah, John's fan is cranking loud tonight, man. We got to figure out something with your...
I don't hear it at all.
Oh, I thought he was talking about Cody.
No, because
John's fan. Okay.
It's just that's just my fan running them. It doesn't sound loud to me. Sorry.
On your computer?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Something.
You know.
Okay.
So much for a third podcast award, huh?
All right. You guys all set?
Yeah. I'm ready.
Okay. All right. I think thanks for getting me the intro early, Jeff.
Wait. 5 seconds.
Oh God. This is literally the 15th time he's gotten up from his desk since we got on at like 8:05.
Oh man. Happens when you get older. It's it's difficult to.
So it was 7. Sorry.
All right. Okay. Are you ready, John?
Completely 100%.
Do you need to go to the bathroom one more time or anything?
No.
Okay.
I had to get my phone for late show, script stuff.
At the sound of the tone, the official "We Like Drinking" time will be 5 o'clock. Commence consumption.
This week on episode 334 of the We Like Drinking podcast, we'll be discussing street names, jukeboxes, and we're spilling the tea with bartender and author of Cocktail Dive Bar, T. Cole Newton. So crack open that beer, uncork that wine, and let's get drinking. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, it's always good when cocktails are flowing, and from the looks of everybody on the panel, the cocktails have been flowing for a while. So let's get ready for a lot of fun tonight. I think we're going to have it, but let's get things started off by saying cheers, my podcast drinking friends, and welcome to Happy Hour 334 of your favorite award-winning topical beer and wine education podcast focusing on fun. We like to have it. So make sure you never miss another episode of our brand of drinking fun by visiting welikedrinking.com/subscribe.
Subscribe.
There's already like 17 chat messages from the viewers, so look out. But let's get into this. Let's find out who we're drinking with and what they've got. We're joined by our usual panel members. We have our California Sustainable Wine Growing Ambassador and recovering wine blogger, Jeff Solomon.
Hey, shalom, everybody.
Our commercial brewer and snake wrangler, John Riak.
Good evening.
And I am your host and certified specialist of wine, Jeff Eccles. Now, our guest this week is an entrepreneur and author who owns New Orleans' 12-Mile Limit Bar. He is joining us to discuss his latest book release, Cocktail Dive Bar, Real Drinks, Fake History, and Questionable Advice from New Orleans' 12-Mile Limit. Please help us welcome T. Cole Newton. Welcome to show, Cole.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
So much. It's honor is all ours to have you on the show tonight. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. But let's see. Hopefully everybody made drinks from the book. I'm just hoping we did that. That would be a good thing. Let's start bottom left with John Riak.
I have in my or what's left after my wife absconded with most of it. After I gave her a taste pre-show, she's like, "Ooh, that's good." I have a Mexican firing squad. 1.5 ounces of Blanco tequila, a couple of dashes of Angostura bitters, 3/4 of an ounce of pomegranate syrup, which I had to make myself, and 3/4 of an ounce of lime juice. So I got some pomegranate juice, and I mix it with some simple syrup. So, and it worked. It's tasty. You got a little lime wedge or a lime slice on the side for a little extra artisticness.
Is there a story behind that one, Cole?
Do you want the any actual history or the fake history of the Mexican firing squad?
Let's go fake history. I think that fits well.
Well, as I relate in Cocktail Dive Bar, the Mexican firing squad, being a classic cocktail, it gets the fake history treatment. The Archduke Maximilian of Austria was installed, and this part's real actually. The Archduke Maximilian of Austria was installed as the first emperor of Mexico, and his reign was very short-lived. And he did, in fact, die by firing squad. Now, the firing squad cocktail that John here is enjoying was named in honor of his short but illustrious reign, in my telling. So like most of the fake histories in the book, there are seeds of truth there. I was a history major in college, but so there are elements of all of those stories that borrow from the real world. And so Archduke Maximilian of Austria ruled Mexico, failed miserably, died by firing squad. Did that inspire this delicious cocktail that is sort of languished in obscurity, like so many classic tequila drinks? Perhaps. I think it did. Why not? It's probably more interesting than the actual story of that cocktail, which I do not know. I did not actually look up the actual.
I think it has something to do with hats.
It probably has something to do with hats. The hat game is strong in Mexico.
This is true. Jeff Solomon, what are you drinking?
Well, I'm drinking something that I can guarantee, based on my Instagram feed, nobody else on the show is going to have the exact same thing as me. Tonight, I am drinking the Baudin. I think the Bowden.
Extra French with it. I appreciate that.
Tonight I'm drinking the Bowden, which is composed of. There's no way anybody else has this. I've got the Black Button Distilling 4-grain straight bourbon whiskey out of New York. Oh shit. Okay. I also have honey syrup that I made. I was digging deep here, T. Cole. I found an interview from 8 years ago in which you made this, and there was a little pro tip in there that you like to do 2 parts honey to 1 part water, and so that is how I made my honey syrup here. I know you prefer local honey. I happened to pick up a bottle that said local honey on it, but it had no name of any city or state where this local honey is from. I don't even know if that's. I don't even know if it's regulated or not, but I guess all honey is local to somewhere. I did lemon juice from the Eureka lemons in my backyard. And traditionally we use Tabasco in this, but I didn't have that. I had Crystal, which I refer to as Cristal, in this house, and then garnished with a lemon peel. And I am sipping this for the very first time.
Yeah, I mean, we want to get that hot, fresh reaction. How you like?
Ooh, I like that a lot. You know, people actually ask for straws with this. They're crazy.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the book, Jeff alluded to, I don't default to serving that one with a straw because I think the tingly spice on the lips, which is a cumulative effect. You get a little bit on the front sip, and then like as you drink it, the spice kind of builds over time. And that's part of the enjoyment of the cocktail. But that the Bowden, however you want to call it, is I made it when I was still at Coquette. So if the chef owner over there had been a litigious type, it was made on his clock. So he could have owned that cocktail if he tried real hard to. But I made it at Coquette for 12-mile limit when I knew we were going to be opening. And it's been a fixture. It's the cocktail I tasted for the first time after making it. And I was like, I'm going to be fine. This bar is going to be a success. I have no doubts. I will hang my hat on this drink for the rest of my days. I gave it an unpronounceable name. That's on me. Sorry about that. But I stand by that cocktail as my best chance of having created a classic.
I have to say, this is beautiful, and I think the spice is what just ties it all together. I'm certain if you had enough of these, and I know I'm the only one here that poured a double tonight, Eccles. I'm certain the extra sugar might, make me get a little crazy, put me on a rant later on. But the spice just like it, crazy enough, the spice mellows it out for me.
Huh. I like the Crystal or Louisiana style hot sauce because they have a real strong vinegar kick. So you get a second source of acidity. A primary, like mostly cocktails, at least mine, because dive bar cocktails, I'm not going yuzu and that, but we do use, I guess I should, we use a lot of weird vinegars. We use shrubs and verjus and other sources of acid, but really most of it's lemon and lime juice. But the reason I started playing with hot sauce and drinks was to get an extra, like a novel source of vinegar or acid to balance out some of those sweet flavors. The spice is just sort of, what you call in Louisiana, you call lagniappe, which is sort of a Cajun French term for just a little something extra.
Nice. I appreciate that.
Jeff, you said Eureka lemons? Are you in Eureka? Are you in California?
I am in California. I'm in the garlic capital of the world. And if you ever get the inkling to make a garlic based cocktail, fucking don't.
Just don't do it. But if you do, name it the Jeff Solomon, please.
Yeah.
Please.
Oh, I love that.
I went to college in Humboldt, so I kind of know that Northern California not as well as I used to. It's been a few years, but
he was up in the Emerald Triangle, as they say.
Yes, indeed. I remember my college years fondly and vaguely.
So about a month or so ago, we got our hands in this book just before it came out. And right away, I started flipping through it, and the Bowden was like the first. I was like, "That's my drink for the show." I put it out on Instagram. I'm like, "The Bowden's what I'm having." So then earlier this week, Jeff Solomon sends us all our group text saying, "Hey, here's the drink I'm having, and it's the Bowden." And I'm like, "Yeah, hey, that's a great idea, Jeff." So I didn't want to copy. I didn't want a repeat. But you can riff on the classics. So I went with the Tiburon, which is reposado tequila, the honey syrup, the Tabasco, and lemon juice with a salted rim. And like Jeff was saying, like the Tabasco really adds something to it, and it's really cool because you get this little bit of heat from the tequila, and then you get this little heat from this hot sauce. So it's kind of this like dueling banjo of spice going on that makes for a really interesting and really tasty drink. I'm really excited to go try the Bowden now to see how the two compare.
Yeah, I think one of the things for a cocktail to really be considered a contemporary classic, and I am serious. I joke about it, but I'm serious about the Bowden being that sort of contemporary classic. Is I think there's a few things you need to. It needs to be easy to make, so replicatable. It has to have relatively accessible ingredients, nothing that's hard to find, things that most people would have in their homes. It needs to have been widespread enough that people start putting it on cocktail lists without checking with the original owner, which has happened. It's been on the list of several bars in New Orleans and several bars, like New Orleans themed bars elsewhere, that only have classic New Orleans drinks on their list, and nobody's ever asked me. And honestly, that is a sign of success. I'm not complaining about that. That means that people just treat it as a drink that exists. And also that instead of just being a cocktail that people make the same way every time, it becomes a template for cocktails. So the idea that the Tiburon, which is in the book, and is a riff, self-disclosed, a riff on the Bowden, because you're just doing simple replacements. It's like lemon for lime, tequila for an aged tequila for an aged whiskey, and do a salt rim because it's a tequila drink that's traditional. But it's everything is just a simple substitution. And like I put this drink on an app once. I saw people were making it with rye. I know that other cocktail bars or bars with cocktail programs in New Orleans have put variations on it with different sweeteners and different hot sauces. Obviously, Crystal instead of Tabasco, and it works. So that being like, and that's the Negroni is I think my example for that one. It's transcended from just a drink that is gin, Campari, sweet vermouth, to any cocktail that is spirit, bitter, wine-based aperitif is now arguably in the Negroni class of cocktails. So that's I think the next level is getting to that where it's if people in 100 years are arguing about the best way to make this drink, then it's a success. That's yes. I won't be around for that probably, but I'm looking my dreams for the future.
Well, with at least these three drinks, it sounds like you've hit it out of the park. And looking through a lot of the other recipes, it looks like you've just got some monsters in there that just look like so much fun to make and drink and everything else. So great job on the recipe part of the book. We'll get into it a little bit more in the interview portion of the show. But before we get to that, folks, we want to make sure that you know that you can find Cole on Instagram at T Cole Newton, Newton, and the 12-mile limit bar at 1212, the number 12-mile limit. So be sure to check those out. And you can find the Cocktail Dive Bar book available at all your favorite bookstore outlets and websites. Beautiful cover, by the way.
Thank you.
Did you know you were going to be a squid?
There's a lot of art in and around the bar. I'm not sure how we settled on squid as sort of a running theme for the bar. So short answer, yes. I knew it was going to be a squid. I commissioned the poster. This was based on the cover that Basil did, one of the two illustrators that worked on the book. It's based on an idea that I had, and I wanted to take the cover from the Marvel Classic Comics edition of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. They had a multi-volume run. Marvel Classics, they did them back in the 70s. It was illustrated, comic style, updates of classic literature. They did a run on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And I think the fourth one is the one where there's giant squid attacking the Nautilus, and it's a very dramatic cover. And visually, a lot of the elements of this are from that. But I also wanted to steal the quirky, fun. There's a scene in Who Framed Roger Rabbit where the gumshoe, the Eddie Valiant, goes to the All Toon Review Club, and all of the employees are cartoons, all the patrons are human, and the bartender is an octopus. And it's just a blink and you miss it gag of this octopus bartender using all his tentacles, and it's super fun. So it's basically the evil, threatening squid from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by way of the octopus bartender from the blink and you miss it gag from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But we did have a ton. There's a mural on the side of the bar. You could probably find pictures of it online on our social media, but there's a giant squid monster. We've had sort of squids and pigs, for whatever reason, flying pigs of various shapes and sizes, and squids and other cephalopods of various shapes and sizes. They've been part of our idiom for a long time. 12 Mile Limit, the name of the bar is based on a semi-obscure nautical legal term. Yeah. So we have a vaguely nautical theme for that reason, but it's also just sort of, it's fun. Who doesn't like squid?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and if anybody ever doubted T. Cole Newton's claim of being a history major, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? That's your answer.
Right.
That's fair. It was a tough time for LA when toons were having a hard time getting but for the black and white cartoons like Betty, after cartoons went to color. It's tough.
All right, awesome. So great drinks. John, I think, is done with his. I'm almost done with mine. So we better move the show along and get into
beer spirit or pop culture reference. I'm going around the horn giving these guys a term, and they're going to guess at it, right? So here is this week's term. Pyruvate. Pyruvate is this week's term. I think this week I'm going to start with Jeff Eccles.
Such a dick. John Ruyak, would you please spell that for us?
Pyruvate.
Pyruvate. Okay. This one feels like you're double dipping into the well with your weblock or whatever you went with the last time you had this. That was some kind of brewing term. This feels like, would the P always be capitalized on this one?
No.
This just feels like the brand name for something that you're using in the brewing process that you're doing. This is some kind of additive that you're using in the brewing process. I'm going to say this is a beer term.
Yeah, okay. Eccles says this is a beer term. Cole, give us your best out of your guess as to what pyruvate is.
Okay. My guess, I am not familiar with this term. I am happy to pontificate on its possible meaning. I would say it is a distilling term and possibly beer term maybe, for open roasting of grains. I'm going to leave pyre, sounds like something that would have fire in it. So that's, over like you would roast malt barley over peat fire, but not that specific. Some variation on that.
That's a much more interesting guess than Eccles's guess.
way more interesting.
Way more interesting. I like that. Solomon, The biology teacher, why don't you tell us what pyruvate is?
So my goodness. So if it comes to wine, beer, or spirits, this is going to count. But also when it comes to food, this is going to count. Pyruvate, which is also known as pyruvic acid, during the process of cellular respiration or fermentation, the very first stage is called glycolysis, where you take a glucose molecule and you split it right down the middle. So glycolysis, right? What you end up with is 2 molecules of pyruvate, also known as pyruvic acid. Each one of them is carrying 3 carbon molecules. And that carbon is important because in the presence of oxygen, those pyruvic acid molecules are going to be broken down in the Krebs cycle, also known as the citric acid cycle. And it's as it's getting ATP and it's generating electron carriers that'll later go onto the electron transport chain, there is carbon dioxide that is produced as well. So that's where those carbons are going from that molecule. But those carbon dioxides are also carbon dioxide is also produced in the absence of oxygen. Our muscle cells, when they don't get enough oxygen, they go through fermentation or anaerobic respiration, where those 2 pyruvic acids get converted into lactic acid, which is what makes your muscles sore. Thank you, Cody. It is. I don't know why John chose it. But in yeast cells, they do this magical thing where instead of producing lactic acid, and by the way, that's the same lactic acid that makes cheese really tangy and shows up during like malolactic fermentation. But yeast, if you cut off its oxygen supply, it's going to take that sugar, break it down into pyruvic acid, and the pyruvic acid is then converted into, you end up getting alcohol and carbon dioxide, and that's what makes your drinks so wonderful.
So is this a wine term, a spirit term, or a beer term?
It's I'm going to say pop culture reference because this biology teacher is on summer vacation.
Oh, I think Solomon wins. That's a good one. But everybody thinks that yeast just takes a glucose molecule and turns it immediately into alcohol and carbon dioxide, and it's like a 9 or 11 step process. It's insane, and the Krebs cycle diagrams are just nuts. You get lost because it goes over several pages.
It's not
anyway.
No, by the way, like my explanation, I don't think I'd get full credit on an AP exam for that.
Yeah, whatever.
Nobody should know that much about that stuff.
All right. Style points to Cole. Right answer to Solomon. Pyruvate.
Cole, did you have any idea?
John just left the show.
I had no idea. I'm not. Although electron chains, that all vaguely sounds like things I learned and forgot at the end of the semester.
The electron transport chain.
Biology for non-science majors was very much my speed.
The electron transport chain is the explanation for, but why do you have to breathe oxygen to stay alive? Because that oxygen is there to catch those free hydrogens at the end, and it turns into water.
Huh. Yeah, that's comforting.
Yeah.
Cole, you made mention to it a little bit before we got going. We're going to move on to the interview portion. If you guys are done biology and chemistry and up on our drinking show.
You know what I love is how
Cole,
no. This goes to Cole because Cole had a wonderful section about surface area to volume ratio inside of Cocktail Dive Bar. And the wrinkling on the inside of the mitochondria where cellular respiration happens, that wrinkling provides more space for more sugar or more pyruvic acids to be broken down.
The wrinkling was about something else.
Oh.
We were talking. The wrinkles were somewhere else. It
So
wasn't.
Cole,
Yeah.
your bar is called, you mentioned it a little earlier. Your bar is called 12 Mile Limit. As you said, there's some historical context to that name on the nautical side of things, but can you tell our listeners where your bar name came from and some of its history about the location?
Yeah. The location of my bar specifically?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we're at 500 South Telemaca Street in Mid-City, New Orleans. We are the bar. There's been a bar at that address for at least 100 years. I don't know if the building was built to be a bar. My first assumption, I heard it was built as a pumping station back when they were first draining this part of New Orleans. Most of New Orleans is underwater, so they had to drain all the swamp water out to build on it. That turned out great. But it was built in the 1900s, so about 120 years ago, the building was built. There's been a bar there since the 20s. It was a ball player hangout in the 20s. A suspiciously old man once told me on a slow night at the bar, he was like, ball players used to hang out here. And I was like, when was that? Expecting him to say something not 100 years ago. And he was like, oh, the 20s. And I looked it up a few years ago when I was doing some research for one of the essays that sort of evolved into the piece on gentrification in the book. And apparently the same time as this was a ball player hangout, the New York Yankees spring training home was at Pelican Park, which is just like a quarter mile from the bar. And they just signed Babe Ruth, who was a notorious alcoholic, even then. So I think it stands that in all likelihood, Babe Ruth has had a drink at the bar that would eventually become 12 Mile Limit. It went through a bunch of different iterations over the years. Every bar that I know of that occupied the place before I did was just named for the first name of the owner. The one before me was a gentleman named Marvin. But 12 Mile Limit it derives its name from a classic cocktail, which is from the Prohibition era. Because during the Prohibition era, the edge of U.S. Territorial waters was extended from 3 miles to 12 miles. 3 miles was a legacy of probably since the 18th century thereabouts. And it was as far as cannons could fire, because you could only really enforce laws offshore as far as you could shoot. And by the time they'd gotten to the Prohibition era in the 19th, 20s, 30s, you could shoot farther than that. There was sort of this obsolete concept of a 3 mile limit. But there was a 3 mile limit cocktail, because that was as far as they wouldn't. If you're looking for a modern analogy, because there still is a 12 mile limit. I have a Google alert set for 12 mile limit. And since Brexit, I get tons of information about the British fishing industry. They are super upset about how Brexit panned out, for the record. We can talk about that if you'd like. I'm now a bit of an expert. But it's if you're on a cruise ship, that's when they open the casino, for example. That's where you can get married by sea captain. And will your marriage be legal on shore? No, but nobody really cares, because laws are just kind of selectively enforced after the 12 mile limit. And during Prohibition, there was a 3 mile limit cocktail that people would enjoy on their yachts. And then they moved the 3 mile limit to 12 miles in an attempt to discourage people from having these big boat parties and to make it slightly more difficult, because people basically just parked container ships 12.1 miles offshore, and they became these smuggling havens. It was a wild time. But as soon as they switched from a 3 mile limit to a 12 mile limit, presumably the next day, somebody had made an improved 3 mile limit cocktail that they call the 12 mile limit cocktail. It is very good. It is exclusively booze. Nobody was smuggling in maraschino liqueur or triple sec at the time. So it's just rum, rye, and brandy, pomegranate syrup, citrus, originally lemon juice. I make it with lime. It gives it a vaguely tropical effect. But that's where the name comes from. I learned about it from Ted Haig's Vintage Spirits and Forgotten Cocktails, which is an excellent cocktail book full of true history, primarily. He was hoodwinked by the person who created the Steelbox cocktail. That was fake history. That's a story for another time, though. But Ted Haig, to whom I owe quite a bit, because I stole not only the name of my bar, one of our signature cocktails, but also kind of the format for the book, Alphabetical Compendium of Cocktails Interrupted by Essays. It's not like he was the only one doing that, but it's definitely one of the more influential works on my own career. Awesome. So full credit to Ted Haig on that one.
Jeff or John? You don't want to.
Just as a point of historical reference, 18-inch guns on World War II battleships have a firing range of 24.5 miles. So maybe we could have another drink called the 24.
Well, I mean, the French 75 that was named for a 75 millimeter cannon. Now, I should note that the French 75, as described in my book, was named for a traveling circus troupe of 75 very talented performers, and they're blind tigers, which is where we get that term from. But in other people's writing, it's been described that the 75 millimeter cannon was so large and could fire so far that the people firing the French 75 had to adjust for the Coriolis effect, which is that the surface of the Earth is spinning at different speeds depending on how far you are from the equator because of the distance you are from the axis. It's that thing that kept Calvin up for hours in Calvin and Hobbes when his dad explained it to him, because his dad was an engineer. And then the last panel of that comic is just Calvin up in the middle of the night considering the implications of records spinning at different speeds at different parts of the axis. That was the Coriolis effect, and the French 75 is vaguely related to that. So I don't know. There's a lot of cocktails that are sort of tied into military hardware for whatever reason. The recurring theme in cocktail naming, at least. I guess military people drink a lot.
It's been known to happen.
Yeah, naval strength gin. You know,
Yeah.
If you mix it with gunpowder, it doesn't.
And it still goes off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, but so I think everyone's sitting in this panel, but only one of us has actually done it. You sit around, you know what? I should write a book. And you did.
I did.
I
did it backwards. You're supposed to, when you get the idea for a book, you're supposed to be somebody who people want to read a book from. I wasn't when I started writing this book when the bar had been open for like 6 months. So there was no reason, we had no audience. There was nobody who was clamoring for a 12-mile limit cocktail book. But I was like, you know what? That's the next phase for me. I was out for brunch, a very hungover brunch. And I was talking to a friend, and I was like, how do I pivot in this? Like, what's next? I should start compiling my cocktails and write a book. And so I just did. And then I tried to start selling a book. Apparently you do it the other way around traditionally. You get an idea for a book. You put together like a chapter, some sample ideas, some recipes. You shop that around. And then somebody gives you a bunch of money, and then you write a book. But I did it the other way around. I wrote a book. I had a complete first draft. And then I was like, I should sell this. And then I tried to sell it. Nobody really wanted it. This was like still 4 years ago when I finished the first draft. Nobody really wanted it at the time. I eventually landed an agent. That was the thing that I needed to do before selling it. So everything sort of happened in the opposite order that you're supposed to do to sell a book. But then when I got the agent, then she taught me how to put together a decent proposal. And then I got together with an illustrator. We got a good proposal together. That was Basil. She was our first illustrator on board. And then people actually, and also, but it's like flash forward 10 years, 12 Mile Limit has been this critically acclaimed bar, and people know about it. We've got an audience, and I've actually published elsewhere. And so I had an audience for my writing too. So it made sense for somebody to buy this book. It made no sense for me to start writing the book when I did, but I'm glad I did too, because I was able to present a complete, like, cohesive vision for this thing that's a very strange book. I think you'll all probably agree. This is a deeply bizarre cocktail book. And I think if I had presented a proposal for this book and it wasn't already basically done, then it would have just been like, can we make it less weird? But they didn't. They leaned, like, the publishers really bought in. They were like, yeah, weird's good. Make it weirder.
And I think timing too, like, the timing of it, I think is really on point too. Like some of the stuff that you talk about in there, I think is the time to be releasing it is now. So, so yeah.
So
Jeff? Or John,
John just loves to. Yes.
No, yeah, I know. That is a curse of mine, isn't it? I was really disappointed reading through your book to realize that I'm the least magical of the bunch.
Are you not a giant? The giants are the least magical.
Well,
Because
I'm
of
the
surface area to
giant. I'm
volume
the
ratio.
giant
Here,
of the group, only by size, not by
Okay.
intellect or
by
talent.
reputation.
Yeah.
See if I can find this Laura's illustration for that. I told her exactly what I wanted, but she really nailed it. There's an illustration here. I'll hold it up where you can see because of surface area to volume ratio. If you have more surface area, that's where the magic happens. In any sort of chemical exchange, it's all happening at the surface. So if you're smaller, you'll have more surface area and will inherently be more magical. So that's why elves are the most magical of the humanoid creatures, and giants are the least magical. I mean, it's just science. I don't make this.
Yeah.
But the illustrations were great for that one. I really appreciated Laura. And if I should have saved that page because I come back to it a lot. But every time Laura draws a person, this is basically a self-portrait of Laura in the middle there. And then it comes up again because the last essay in the book is about the bum's rush and about how to kick people out of the bar without being a dick about it. And
that's her. Is that her throwing them out?
It is, again, the same caricature of Laura that she drew of herself executing the bum's rush. So,
and it looks like she's throwing John out, is what it looks like.
Pretty much.
So you talk about the process of making the book being a little bit of a backwards endeavor, and I do think that gosh, I think backwards is the way that most folks should do it. Like, we like drinking. We probably should have put out episode number 1 when we got to episode 150. I think that's when we probably really got there. So please, whatever you do, everybody, do not download episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Don't do it. Well, download it, just don't listen.
Yeah, download delete.
Yeah, make more space.
149
download more.
Times.
Do not listen. Okay, so T. Cole, I kind of want to talk to you about the book a little bit backwards. I want to start with the afterwards because as much as and really like for everybody to kind of like think about the way that I think about this book is, as a teacher, I often talk to people about like textbooks, and it's like it's not meant to be read from front to back. Find what you need and jump around. And there is an inherent jumping aroundedness that comes with cocktail books in general. However, I think once somebody starts getting into the first cocktail, you don't want to stop reading. The asides are wonderful, but I honestly I felt like magic in the afterwards, in the fact that throughout the book, like it's not really like this hidden thing, but it's very casual that you drop like, yeah, I'm not really a big drinker or anything like that, and at the end you do kind of get into a little bit more detail, and I know that and I don't think we really need to talk about, situations that people can read in the book. But what I was wondering is, as a bartender who doesn't drink that often, doesn't drink that much, do you find that there are inherent challenges in conversations that you have with patrons as they find out that you don't drink?
Not usually. Occasionally, someone will, because people always want to buy the bartender a drink for a variety of reasons. They all think we're your buddy, and often we are. That's not entirely a misplaced narrative. Sometimes we are very much buddies with the people that are drinking, but they really want to create that rapport. People also just don't want to be drinking alone. So if they're like, "Hey, can I buy you a shot?" It's like, sure. And occasionally, if you turn somebody down, they do get a little crestfallen. But that's usually the worst of it. I think I am very fortunate that I came to realize that I needed to change the way I personally engaged with alcohol at the time that I did. Because I never became a full-blown, like, chemically dependent alcoholic. I can still have a drink every now and then. I can have a glass of wine at a wedding. I'll have a nice cocktail if I'm visiting a friend at a cocktail bar and I haven't been there in a while. I'll have a shift drink at the end of a long shift. I'll have a nice beer or whatever I'm feeling. And I can still taste cocktails. I think that's the big thing, that I can sample alcohol. I'll spit most of it out, swallow just a little bit. I can do those elements of the job that become significantly more difficult if you've reached a point in your relationship with alcohol where you have to abstain completely. And I know bartenders who've done that. I know bartenders who haven't touched a drop internally, who haven't ingested a drop of alcohol in decades, and they're very skilled bartenders. They've been doing this for a long time, and that presents a lot of advantages too. I mean, being very like clear and sober at the end of the night, it's like, I think you got the narrative, like I still see headlines where it's like, is sober bartending a good idea? It's like, absolutely, sober bartending is a good idea. Like, would you like, is getting high on your own supply at work a good idea? It's like, no, it's not. But there's advantages to that as well. Like you develop that rapport. It can be a social lubricant. Like there's some of my favorite bartenders drink their entire shift. So I don't want to say that what's right for me is right for everybody. But because I never got to that point where I had a chemical dependency, where I had to completely abstain from alcohol to save my life and my family, that kind of desperation that people hit, it allows me to engage in a way where I can, if somebody wants to buy me a shot, I'll be like, all right, I'll pour a little quarter ounce so we can participate in this. And I'm not actually drinking a meaningful amount of alcohol, but we can still have fun with it. And I'm not like killing the party or the mood.
That's so cool. Thank you for elaborating on that. And I just had to, it seems to me like a nice transition here. I was just, every single one of your asides, every single one of your essays, I was just glued to it. And in the way in which, again, kind of sprinkled throughout the book, it's very matter of fact, like, yeah, I don't drink, it's you have opinions, and you have these solid opinions that are well thought out. And in the same respect, I could even go back to the beginning as you're talking about, modeling your bartending style after Maury Povich, like, in this non-judgmental way. It's like, yeah, this is how I feel about these things. Thinking about the relationship between booze and what I would say is your most powerful aside here about how bars and bartenders can help fight sexual harassment and assault. It was one of those chapters to me that was like, it's upsetting. It's also necessary, and I'm glad that people are talking about it. And I was just wondering if maybe you could elaborate on, like, throughout this process of being a bartender and then owning your own bar and running your own bar. I mean, your ideas here are these things that you kind of developed through trial and error and through experience here, or was there a certain point in which you felt like, I need to write this and I need to get this out?
It was kind of both. I think part of it was trial and error and trying to figure out a way to mitigate some of the harm that is inherent in what I do. Like I recognize, and I'm not saying that, I mean, I own 2 bars. It's not like I think the bars are inherently bad. But bad things happen at bars, and the degree to which we allow them to happen makes us complicit in these systems that we can do something about. We all have power. We're a collection of people who have a lot of privilege. The 4 of us, I think, even as individuals, have a lot of privilege in our society. And I'm quoting Bell Hooks when I say, what matters is what we do with privilege. So I have this platform. I have this space that in some ways is a very positive space. We can use it as the community gathering place there. People have had their wedding receptions at the bar. People come to celebrate and mourn and do political organizing. We do a lot of fundraisers. We do, I hope, good for the community. But I also recognize that a lot of people are victims of sexual violence, and the vast majority of people, at least of a certain age, who are victims of sexual violence, were drinking in bars with their attackers at some point in that evening. And recognizing that we are participating in that system, and if we're not actively working against it, we are perpetuating it. And I moved to New Orleans to do volunteer work. I was with AmeriCorps for a while. I'm very much, I'm not sure how this term became a pejorative, but proud social justice warrior, want to make the world a better place. And bars can do that, but only if we're actively involved in working towards those ends. And a lot of the book is, I mean, I could give a fuck about cocktails. I'm not going to lie. They're delicious. I'm good at making them. They're fun. They are not something that I feel passionate about, to be honest. They're something I've leaned into cocktails as a career because I have an aptitude for it. But my real, like, I don't care. Making fancy drinks is not something I feel of as a calling. It's just something that I'm particularly good at. So the book itself is sort of a Trojan horse. Like, here are all these fancy cocktails. I made a lot of them myself. Here's some fun stories about owning a bar. Also, we need to have, like, let's sit down and have some real conversations about the implications of owning a bar and what it means to society to own a bar and how you can use your power for good and should. And if you don't, you're kind of an asshole.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. And I definitely, as I was reading through the asides, I had that as a question that you just answered. It was like, was the book more about getting the messages out that you've learned? Because it really seemed like you've learned a lot of these things, especially when you're talking about the systemic racism and the sexual misconduct in your time as owning a bar. And so I was reading the book and I was like, did he write this book to have this conversation or to tell about the drinks? And so you just answered that. So I appreciate that. So since you started 12 Mile Limit, related to the subjects that you write your asides about, what do you think has been the most eye-opening thing that you've come to realize during that process or over that course of time?
I think, and I'm grateful that it's no longer on the internet. But I wrote an essay on gentrification. This would have been 5-6 years ago, maybe. It was published by Tales of the Cocktail on their website when it was when Tales was under its previous ownership. It was talesofthecocktail.com. And fortunately, it did not survive the transition to talesofthecocktail.org now that they are a nonprofit organization, or they're leaning more into the nonprofit identity of the organization. It didn't survive. And I'm kind of grateful for that, because the original essay I wrote on gentrification was not as, it suffered from a number of defects, I will put it that way. It at best, it centered my experience of gentrification, which is not the most important narrative. It was the one I felt most qualified to tell, but I also was like, maybe do some homework instead of just talking about how gentrification has affected you. Maybe that's the better way to talk about gentrification. And also, in addition to centering my experience of gentrification, it was fatalist. It treated the inevitability of gentrification as something that I had little control over, and sort of I gave up my agency and also sort of abdicated my responsibility for gentrification. And it is, I mean, it's not like this neighborhood wouldn't have been, I mean, I'm sitting in a fancy house that was on an empty lot 10 years ago when I bought the bar. And then 5 years ago, the neighborhood had gotten nice enough that my wife, who wouldn't have really considered living in this neighborhood when the bar was new, was like, yeah, this is the house I want to live in indefinitely. And so, and I have doubled down. Not only do I own a hipster bar with what was a lower middle class neighborhood, predominantly lived historic, at least for the 50 or so years before I owned the bar, it was mostly a black neighborhood. Now it's less so. I don't know what the exact breakdown is. It's probably close to 50-50. But anytime you see that, it's not because the neighborhood has become diverse. That's a snapshot of a moment in time. You see a neighborhood that was very black, or a city that was mostly black, and then it's like, oh, look, now it's 50% white. That's not stopping there. That's not the end of that pendulum swing. But recognizing that, again, because we have privilege means that we have power. And yes, I've exacerbated the system that was somewhat inevitable anyway. If I'd not bought that bar, if I'd not bought this house, this neighborhood would have continued through that cycle. It might have taken a little bit longer, but I still, even if I'd never done that, I've descended from slave owners. I recognize that my station in the whole world is sort of wrapped up in all of this. And especially last year, after everything, sort of the great racial reckoning that America went through last year, it felt like just acknowledging that it was a problem wasn't nearly enough. So being able to revisit that and conceptualize what power I do have to affect the world and sort of undo some of the harm that some of which was inevitable and some of which I exacerbated, that I have power and I have agency to do something about it. I think that was one of the bigger realizations that I came to just between when I started writing about gentrification and now.
And I do have to say, like, the way you wrote about it, it was very powerful the way you wrote about it, because I think it came so much from your first person experience of watching the things happen in any of the things you talked about. So I really do appreciate you putting those thoughts and the actions to words and putting in this book. So great stuff. And Jeff Solomon had shared with us earlier, he's like, this is flat out the best recipe book I've ever read in my life. And I'm sure it had to do with that portion of the book, which is why it transcends just a recipe book and really gets to like an owner's manual, I think, for people that are wanting to start up their own bar, just for the fact of asking questions that they may not think to ask.
Mm-hmm.
John,
you know what
it
reminded me of, and I'll be real quick on this, John, because I want to get to your question too. It reminded me of, as a California sustainable wine growing ambassador, I was thinking about like these three major tenets of sustainability, and I think as we get to the third one, I think the third part is the thing that a lot of folks focus on. But in this book, like just being a good neighbor, which is something that shows up quite a bit in that aside on gentrification and what are you doing locally to support your neighborhood and really be a part of that community. You talked about the responsibility of being a good employer as well. And then also what a lot of times people think of when we think about sustainability, we think about being good to the earth. And I know that there's little things in there in terms of, even your take on straws, which I go back to the Bowden a little bit, but this is the point in which I did want to give you some unsolicited advice in terms of how to run your business. T. Cole Newton. In the spirit of sustainability, have you considered changing your name from T. Cole to T. Solar?
I have not given that a great deal of thought. I would consider adding solar panels to the bar. Our roof is largely porous and much softer than it should be, so I'm not sure it would sustain the weight. But I think there are parts of it that we could solarize, and I would. You know what? We got a pretty substantial restaurant revitalization fund allocation. We might have some money for solar now. That's an outdoor improvement that follows under it. Maybe I'll look into that. Thank you for the note. I will look into that. I'm not going to change my name. My professional identity is too tied up in it at this point. But the solar note is a strong one, and I will. You know what? There's a company down here. My friend Liz runs it. I can't think of the name. Project Greenlight, something like that. I don't know. They do sustainability consulting for small businesses, and one of their things is paint your roof white. And so when we reshingled our roof, I suggested that to our contractor, and they were like, we are not going to do that. And I was like, all right, but can we use a lighter gray shingle so we have it draws in less heat? And they were like, yeah, we can do that. So those are the kind of little changes that you can make as a business owner and have a lasting effect. That's
how we achieve full 100% albedo, is the slightly lightening of gray.
John, you look like
I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't think my joke would go that long, but I appreciate
it. We did.
Yeah, we knew.
No, when Eccles mentioned that this is like an owner's manual for a bar, the whole Maury Povich essay, I'm taking this. We just opened a new brewery location, and we hired 12, 14 servers and bartenders to serve beer and serve food. They're going to have to sign, as a part owner, they're going to have to sign off on that essay.
Who would have thought? Be more like Maury Povich
Povich.
is words to live by.
That
He's
must
a
have
great
been
role
really
model.
hard. That must have been really hard.
One of these days, everybody, patrons, remind me for an after party one time. I'll talk to you about the Maury Povich incident.
The time you were on
Also.
Maury Povich.
Well, no, I wasn't, but I'll talk to you about the Maury Povich incident.
The
That was
one
right.
time.
DNA
You went right-
result came
You
back.
went right from The Price is Right to the Maury Povich show.
Yeah. The Maury Povich, it's a little more nuanced, but
Cole,
that was a
one
good
of our listeners wanted to know, is the angel shot a real thing? So if you felt unsafe for any reason, you could simply order an angel shot and the bartender would know you needed help.
There are bars that have put up messaging that's similar to that. So there's an angel shot. There's also Ask for Angela. That's another variation on that. And I've seen this was a kind of a trend about 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't like that as a messaging strategy for a couple of reasons. One, I think having the required specialized dial. There's the angel shot, and you can modify it certain ways depending on the severity of your situation. If you needed somebody to call the cops, or if you needed just somebody to run interference for you, if you're on a bad date, you could ask for different kinds of angel shots. And having that specialized vernacular, I feel like makes it less likely that people will use the system that you're trying to build. And ultimately, I think it all of the solutions that were tied to these signs would go up and you'd almost exclusively see them in women's rooms, which I think is a problem, because the bigger impact that you have as a bar owner when you put messaging in the restroom is not letting, part of it, and it's important that your female patrons know that you're looking out for their interests, but it's also important that your male patrons, and at the risk of being overly sexist here, the vast majority of people committing sexual violence are male, or cisgender men. So if you put it in the men's bathroom, if you have gendered bathrooms, then you are sending a message not to the victim, but to the perpetrator, that this behavior will not be welcomed there. And a key element, and we talk about it in the essay on sexual violence prevention, the key element of the strategy is that we're changing the narrative, that so much of popular culture, so much of the way that people are taught to engage with romance and physical attraction is rape culture. It's so embedded. The true love first kiss is just an untelegraphed lunge, and so you get everything from Disney movies through hardcore pornography is all based on this idea that if you just put it out there, then it'll work. You gotta just force your way into these situations. It's all terrible. It's rape culture. It's the worst. But to creating a space where people know that is wrong, and I think people fundamentally know that it's wrong. There's a reason why so many perpetrators of sexual violence themselves have to get drunk in order to do it, because sober them knows that it's wrong, but they know that if they get drunk, they will lose their own willpower to stop themselves from doing it. But if you're reinforcing that message just a handful of times, if somebody in a circle of friends is like, hey, buddy, that's not fucking cool, then that has a really strong cumulative effect. And there's an organization called Green Dot that is wholly based around this idea that bystander intervention has virality. So if you look at an outbreak, if you're looking at sexual violence as a plague, then each incident, when you see any outbreak movie, there's like a little red dot and then it grows, and it's pretty quickly they take over the entire map. And so every instance in which sexual violence is tolerated or encouraged in pop culture, in just letting boys be boys, whatever kind of version of this that you want, every time you allow that to happen and don't say anything, don't do anything about it, don't intervene in some way, that's a red dot and it grows. But you can have green dots too. You can have those moments where somebody checks their friend, when somebody intervenes on behalf of a stranger, when a bartender says, no, I'm not going to send that random woman a shot, you don't know her. If you just say, no, this isn't okay, we need, and that's what the sign in the bathroom does. In a subtle, respectful, you don't have to directly intervene. You just let people know that it's not okay to act like that, or it shouldn't be. Sometimes we treat it like it's okay so much as a society that it's understandable why people get confused about what consent even really is.
And
All right.
and I did want to say and it's kind of implicit in what you're talking about here is like the communication and the modeling of expectations, and even in the essay talking about like when you're seeing something that you need to intervene in, also let the people that you're working with and the people that you're around know. Because it makes things a whole lot more clear, which, on many ways, to the question that was asked in the chat, that's kind of like the antithesis. Like, getting help shouldn't be like the secret In-N-Out burger menu with like a nod and a wink. It can be and actually should be more direct oftentimes, right? So I really, again, that was to me just a very powerful section, and I was glad that was there.
There's before we move on from that, there was the one I did specifically because I wrote an essay. This was also published by Tales. They were the first place I ever published my writing professionally. And so I wrote a version of the sexual violence prevention essay for Tales, and then I wrote a follow-up essay specifically about the problems I have with the Angel Shot or the Ask for Angela campaign. And I did a bunch of research trying to find different examples of it. There's a Hooters that put up a sign in their women's bathroom that it was an Ask for Angela situation. But the first line on the poster was, "Are you on a date that's not going well?" It's like, did your date bring you to Hooters on a first date? You could already,
that was my first thought.
They should have that sign on the front door of the restaurant. Like, did your date bring you here? Maybe you should go home. Not that I have anything against Hooters. Hooters can be fun, and maybe it's a great like third date spot. But don't assume date one that Hooters is going to get the job done, fellas. That's
yeah. Agreed.
Don't do that.
All right, guys. If you have one last important question that you want to make sure you get in the show, you have a chance to do it now, John.
There was something about, when I was reading through the book and trying to take some notes, and of course, if you saw my desk, just the whole getting people to leave thing, and because I've had to, I'm not. I'm the brewer, but I'm in the serving area a lot, and asking people to leave is just tough, and it seems rough. But your whole point, there's some basic human decency out there, and of the 3 people I've had to kick out of the brewery, 2 of them said thank you.
Good job.
They knew they were being assholes, and I called them on it, and I wasn't mean. I just said, you got to go.
Not going to tolerate that action.
It's not cool. You just got to go. So, yeah.
It's more of a statement than a question.
Yeah, just a statement. I mean, I just
Okay.
reading through that essay was like,
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I did it right.
It sounds like it. Jeff, Eccles,
Yeah.
Jeff, to your point about it being a statement and not a question, it's like negotiating with a toddler. It's like, this is what's going to happen. I respect that you have some agency in this situation, but not as much as you think.
No,
and if
really
you start like being plaintive and be like, oh, could you really just use the pot? You're dead in the water.
Yep, done for.
You got it. It's like you're firm. You are fair. Low voice. No, we're trying to de-escalate. Everything's about de-escalation at this point. But as soon as you start being plaintive and asking them to leave, or asking the kid to clean up after themselves, then you've lost. The thread is gone.
May as well just walk away.
Yeah.
Jeff Solomon.
I was single dadding it this weekend, and man, when we ran out of bananas, try explaining that to a 1-year-old. It was not pretty.
Oh man, I've got a 2.5-year-old here, for whom I got a lot of quality time with last year, and that was a pretty good silver lining.
For sure.
So I don't know if you know this, T. Cole Newton, but I used to work at a record store, and I was so happy to see, you know, we'll call it the index. You know, you had those couple of pages, you know, referencing all the drinks that were named after artists and songs and everything like that. That was so good. And then doubled down, actually tripled down, because I know somewhere in I was looking at a different cocktail that I was going to write, and it had something to do with like DC hardcore music, and I'm like, I like Fugazi, and I got really stoked on that. But then, sorry, and then I caught you in an interview again. I was like kind of digging deep, trying to find some nuggets. You wrote something, or you were saying something to somebody about how you personally curated every song in your jukebox. Is that still the way of the world at 12?
Well, I mean, the idea, that's the beauty of a jukebox, is like, that's all, not everything in there is something that I specifically chose. There are CDs in the jukebox that were recommended by regulars. We, you know, every now and then we'll revamp the jukebox, and something that I love but has worn out its welcome will get removed, and we'll replace it with something that staff recommends. So it's not like everything was actively selected by me, but everything passed the Cole seal of approval.
So,
and that's like, it's, you get 100 CDs, right? Like that's the rule. So that's not a lot, but it's enough to get a real broad spectrum. And it's a great way to engage, because the guest really feels like they're picking the song, but they're only picking from the 100 albums that you have allowed them to choose from. So it's like, there are times I'll be at the bar and like I forget that we've switched over to the jukebox from my playlist, and I'm like, oh man, this is a good mix, or whatever the bartender was listening to. If it wasn't me, it's like, oh, this is a good playlist. Oh, it's the jukebox, so it's just me.
You know what? You need. We have an internet jukebox at our original brewery, and people do revenge requests. Mm-hmm. So they get up, they've done with their 3 beers, they get up and they pay for a song that everybody hates, and then they leave.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's too much freedom. You gotta narrow the playing field a little bit. Also, I don't know if this has happened to you, but there's a you can, if you have the app that's connected to the internet jukebox, you don't have to be at that location to play a song.
That's correct.
So you can play songs in bars on the other side of town.
Yes, you can.
And you can repeat it 12 times.
That's harder than you think, because the internet jukeboxes, they're smart enough that they don't let you play the song over and over again, except in the instances in which that famous song appears on multiple things. There's a prank called seal bombing that you can do, where you can play "Kiss from a Rose" because it appears on the Batman Forever soundtrack, on an album from Seal, and also on a greatest hits album from Seal. So the internet jukebox doesn't recognize that as the same track. So you can play that "Kiss from a Rose," which honestly, if you're going to listen to the same song 3 times in a row, "Kiss from a Rose" is a pretty good one. But
you got me fired up, Cole. I gotta get in here. With your curated jukebox, I have to know, and this is only stuff that you selected, that at one point you said, yeah, I'm going to put this in the jukebox. I need to know, what is the song that you picked that every time it comes on, you're like, fuck yeah, that's why I put it there. And I also need to know, what is the song that you regret that you put in there, but you cannot take out because everybody else loves it?
That song, I can tell you, does not exist. There's "Kill Your Darlings." There's no sacred cow. I'll start with the second question first. The song that I regretted, I put in the album, the CeeLo Green album that had "Fuck You" on it. And you know what? "Fuck You" is a pretty good song. I'm not gonna lie. I don't want to hear it again. And I think that's a solid album. It's got a lot of good stuff on it. The "Bright Lights, Big City" is still a really good song. There's a lot of good songs on that album that are not "Fuck You," but nobody played any of those songs. Mm-hmm. People just played "Fuck You" 4 times a night for like the first 2 years the bar was open. And eventually I was like, nope, you know what? That one's got to go. And that's one of the reasons that certain albums get axed. It's because sometimes the most popular song on an album is the one I want to hear the least, and that's the one that gets played the most. That's why we had to take Tom Petty out. I got Tom Petty. We had Tom Petty's greatest hits in there. I was like, you know what? American Girl's a great song. Breakdown's a great song. A lot of these songs are great songs, but people just want to listen to Free Fallin' over and over again. And our bartenders got sick of it. So we took it out and replaced it with a Rihanna album. But I have a real soft spot for the song "Here Come the Girls" by Ernie Cato. Ernie Cato was kind of a one-hit wonder. He had a hit with a song called "Mother-in-Law," sort of early rock and soul. That was Ernie Cato. That was his one national hit. But he was kind of a sensation in New Orleans for a while. He has a song called "Here Come the Girls." This is a real good it's good. It's a good song. If you haven't heard it, look it up. It's also, you can play it on my jukebox very easily. It's on an Alan Toussaint collection because he produced it. He produced a lot of the classic New Orleans soul sound with a lot of Alan Toussaint. So a lot of credit there. Oh wow! I'm trying to think. There's a "Can't I Change My Mind" is another one that's just on a random mix of New Orleans soul music. I can't even think of who sings that one, but there's a few. I also, you know what I like to do? My favorite thing to do with a jukebox. There's if you put in a $5 bill, you get 17 picks, best value for your buck, and there are exactly 16 songs in the jukebox that have the word "baby" in the title. A Stax record collection. I'm a big Stax Records fan. You see the Stax Records tattoo there. So there's a Stax record collection. There's a couple on there, including "B.A.B.Y." by Carla Thomas, "Baby," "B.A.B.Y. Baby." There's a Tom Waits song that has "baby" in the subtitle. It's a very eclectic collection of music that all has the word "baby" in it. And also, I feel very now that I have my own baby and I am experiencing this different type of relationship with I love this thing that is a baby. And it's why did we use that to describe romantic love? That's a very strange way to refer to an adult human that you're attracted to, is to call them a baby. And I guess babies are very they are products of adult sexuality, but there's an effect. I don't know. It's the whole idea of baby as a romantic term has become very confusing for me since I've entered into fatherhood.
I just remember in the middle of the night, child number one, just rocking him because he was just having trouble figuring out babies are born nocturnal. That's a thing. We can talk about it in an after party sometime. And I sang a song. I just got right up in his ear and I went, "Baby, baby, 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 baby."
Okay, that was a fantastic diatribe there, Solomon. Cole Newton, one last time back to the book. I have one more question for you. Your Young Americans drink seems particularly remarkable to me. I'm curious as to why you were so bold as to come up with a recipe that includes what has been called by many the worst drink in the world. The spirit with remarkable taglines such as "Tonight's the night you fight your dad" and "These pants aren't going to shit themselves." Obviously, I'm talking about Chicago's own Malort.
Why I felt, you know what? That was an assignment, actually. I was working with the team from Bitterman's. They'd sponsor I'm big into the Bartenders Guild, the USBG. I'm actually on the executive, on the national board for the Bartenders Guild. I've been part of the New Orleans chapter for a long time. And back in 2013, I was going to Portland Cocktail Week as a representative of the New Orleans chapter of the US Bartenders Guild, because they were still pretty simpatico then, the Portland Cocktail Week team and the USBG. They since had a bit of a falling out. I hope to help repair that relationship eventually, but that's a conversation for another time. But they were supposed to ask around in your network, see if you can get somebody to sponsor your trip so that you can make a cocktail for the showcase and they can send you with some liquor. So I reached out to my friends Janet and Avery Glasser, who own Bitterman's, and they were at the time they make some of the best bitters in the country. They've been in the bitters game long before it was trendy, and they were also importing their own Malort to compete with the Chicago Malort. They were importing a Malort from France. And they were trying to get it to take off as an alternative Malort because the world clearly needed more kinds of Malort.
More wormwood drinks.
More wormwood. Everyone should be drinking more wormwood. I mean, people do. People drink shitloads of vermouth. It's not like wormwood does not get consumed. But they were like, hey, you should make it with vodka schnapps, our brand of Malort. And I was like, I didn't really know anything about Malort. I was just like, sure. But honestly, the drink is really not. Did anyone try it? Any of the Jeff, John, any try the Young American?
I've not tried the Young Americans yet.
It's surprisingly palatable. So I was like, okay, I approached it like I approached a Campari cocktail. I used to think Campari was too bitter to be approachable, and now it's sweet, right? I used to think hoppy. I used to think Sierra Nevada was too hoppy a beer for me, and now it's like, okay, that's pretty entry level, right? I mean, this was obviously 20 years ago. This is the American palate's changed. People are used to bitter flavors now, and honestly, I think Malort's going to be the same way. Now it's something like people prank each other by like daring them each other to drink, and that come around. And Malort's not bad, but approaching it is like, okay, what are the classic uses for Campari? You pair it with sweet vermouth. Goes with a lot of things with orange in them. And honestly, Malort and vodka. If you're looking for a way to, and because Young Americans have vodka base, I'm trying to remember that one. Copy here. Yeah. No, it's not a vodka drink, but honestly, that's a good way to enjoy Malort too. So the Malort is if you do just equal parts Malort and vodka. Vodka, and we talk about this a little bit in the essay or in the book when we talk about the great idea, because it's Amaro and vodka. Vodka, you can really unpack flavors. It has a really strong mixological application because it doesn't have a lot of inherent flavor. That's the whole concept, is that it's essentially a flavorless spirit. But a lot of flavors are alcohol soluble. So the weaker something gets, the lower its capacity to carry flavor. So if you're mixing with some of these super bitter things and you like the flavors, but they're just too densely packed, which I think is the problem for Malort. People like bitter flavors. People like wormwood. People drink vermouth all the time, like we said. It's just too much in this small little package. But if you cut it with vodka, so you're not reducing its capacity for flavor, you're just unpacking those flavors, then you can get a lot out of Malort. And it's like just equal parts vodka and Malort. It becomes this sort of sweet, innocent, approachable, fun, bittersweet thing instead of that, want to fight your dad, shit your pants kind of drink.
I just had this vision of the next viral internet sensation, and it does not go outside of these 4 walls. Well, everybody count the walls. These 16 walls that are holding us in right now. What if we did like the bitters version of Hot Ones? We get celebrities and we take them down the list of like more and more bitter spirits. Maybe start with a Sierra Nevada and work our way up to some. I see Rhett in the chat is loving absinthe. I sure do too. But working our way up there, and then you see Rihanna at the end being like, yeah, this is these pants aren't gonna shit themselves.
And honestly,
there have been some viral videos that were like Americans drinking Italian liqueurs for the first time, that kind of stuff. There's some precedent for that. But I do think getting gullible celebrities involved is that's your chocolate and peanut butter right there. That's the missing piece.
And at the point that 3 of the panel members have talked about shitting their own pants, I guess it must be. Last call. Clean house and lock the doors. You know we do here, folks, for looking for a little bit of help from you. John Ruyak, if the folks want to follow us on the social media platforms, how can they do so?
There's a couple of places on the social internet web things that you can follow us. And that's Twitter, We Like Drinking 1, numeral 1. Instagram, We Like Drinking. And the tavern, which is welikedrinking.com/tavern, which is also available on Facebook. It's invitation only. Ask us really politely, and we'll say yes and let you in. Cover charge is $0.
Cole, one last time, where is the best place for the folks to follow you on the social media platforms and find this fantastic book?
I am at T. Cole Newton, no periods, no spaces, no weird characters, across Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The bar 12 Mile Limit is primarily available at the word 12 Mile Limit across most platforms. I think Instagram, we're the number 12 Mile Limit. You can also you can find the book Cocktail Dive Bar at many retailers from coast to coast. I can assure you it is available from Seattle to South Carolina, and also on the internet if that's where you choose. But I would recommend. I'm supposed to remain platform agnostic, so I will just make people aware of the fact that your local bookseller should be able to get it at your request if you reach out to them to do so. I'm not advocating that, but it's certainly an option. But yeah, you can find it on the internet, or you can just swing by the bar 12 Mile Limit, or my other bar, the Domino, over in the Bywater neighborhood, a relatively new bar. We've got copies for sale of both, and all of those copies will be signed. Oh, also, if you order from Blue Cypress Books here in New Orleans, who have a pretty good website, so you can do it from anywhere, all copies sold through them will be signed. So if you want to order an autographed copy for your home, you don't live in New Orleans, go to bluecypressbooks.com. That's the way to do that.
Perfect. Jeff Solomon, if the folks have some thoughts on the show, shitting their pants, or anything else, where can they go to leave a review of our show?
Well, as you're considering leaving a review, I offer you this. You know, Ruyak so eloquently let us all know that we are found at We Like Drinking on the Instagram, and I feel it's important to go through our Instagram feed and try to pick out how many times Jeff Eccles comments on his own posts. Then I want you to leave a comment in our YouTube comment section. I want you to go to the Apple Podcast Pod Store, whatever the fuck it's called. I want you filling up the 5 stars, and all I want you leaving for a review is a number. How many times did you see Jeff Eccles commenting on his own posts before you threw up in your own mouth?
My mom likes every single thing that both of my bars post. And she asked once, like, is that helpful? And I was like, well, it doesn't hurt. And she was like, okay, I'm going to keep doing it then. But literally and my aunt, her sister, they both like every single post within minutes of it going up. And I'm grateful. Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Aunt Boo. You're the best.
And if you've done all, thank you, Mom. Thank you, T. Cole Newton's family.
Thank you.
And if you've done all that and you want to do more, considering unfollowing Jeff Solomon on the social media platforms, but also considering become a supporter of the show by visiting welikedrinking.com/pledge to find out how you can become a supporter through our Patreon program. Fuck you, Jeff Solomon. You can also find the show notes for this episode with all the links of the stories or mentions we had at welikedrinking.com/episodes. All right, that was a lot. We did go a little long, which we knew we would because there was so much in this book for you to digest. So you should go pick it up. But we reached the time of the show where I get to say, okay, panel, let's take one last trip around this table and get some final thoughts before we shut off the lights. John Ruyak.
Yeah. So everybody knows how much respect I have for people that are in the agricultural business, farming barley and hops and all those things, and grapes and all the things that go into spirits. But I reached a new level of appreciation when I received my water bill, because I've got a very modest 6 by 8 foot raised bed garden in my backyard with 4 tomato plants, 6 peppers, used to be 2 zucchini plants, but now there's just 1. Keeping plants alive in Albuquerque in the midst of a early summer heat wave has been a challenge. So kudos to you, farmers and agricultural professionals out there. Man, it's hard work keeping those things alive.
Jeff Solomon.
You could unfollow at Jeff is Rad on all social medias if you would like. However, I think what would even be more fun is to do some sleuthing and figure out which comments at We Like Drinking are done under Jeff Eccles' burner account. Boom!
Cole Newton, any final thoughts before we let you get out of here?
Sometimes I take a step back and recognize how fucking lucky I am. So I mean, and like as people dream, it's one of the classic American dream jobs is move to New Orleans, open a bar, maybe a quiet neighborhood bar. We'll serve some fancy drinks though. No, like I am living many people's American dream, and I'm so grateful that my life has taken me on this path, and this brought me into this weird 16-sided room with y'all. So this has been a treat. Thank you for having me. I'm the luckiest man in the world, and this has been fun. This is a good combo, guys. I like what you're doing here.
Thank you very much. And Cole, like again, we really drove home like this is a fantastic book. This is
so good.
It's so good, especially in the industry that we're in. I think it's a very important book for people to pick up, not just for the drinks. I mean, whatever. But
there's a million books about drinks. That's
whatever. But for everything else that you have into it, I think it took a lot to put that out there, and it really is appreciative. And by the way, even though you don't give a shit about it, there's some fantastic freaking drinks in here from what we've seen on the show so far. So pick it up for that too, listeners. But thank you so much, Cole, for joining us. I know it's late for you there.
It's barely 11 o'clock. We're good.
And with that, I'll say thanks again for joining us at the We Like Drinking podcast, where you'll never drink alone. And John just either sneezed or threw up. One of the other.
I was fighting to sneeze at the very end. All these forest fires from 6% humidity.
Cole, one last time, where should people go if they want a signed copy? Because Rhett wants a signed copy.
Blue Cypress Books. I think their website is bluecypressbooks.com. But if you Google Blue Cypress Books New Orleans, that's the landing spot if you're out of town and want to get one. You're in town, by the bar.
We'll try to throw that in the show notes, everybody, too.
Yeah.
Blue Cypress Books.
Thanks for the book, Cole. This is
awesome stuff.
Really neat.
Viewers, Table Talk with Christy Harris. We haven't seen you here before. Thank you so much for joining us for a little bit of the show. Brad, thanks for sticking around the whole time. Red, everybody else, it was awesome having you guys in here tonight. And we will see you next week. I don't think we have a guest next week. I think it's off the chains. It's been like 8 weeks since we haven't had a guest, so it's going to be an absolute shit show next
it'll
week.
Be a shit show.
And next week we're actually going to do it on
Wednesday night next week.
Is it my fault?
I might want to fight my dad. I might want to shit my pants. I don't know.
Both on the same night. So viewers, thank you all so much, and we will see you next week.
Bye, viewers.